This is Marshini Chetty. She is a research scholar at Princeton. I should say an outstanding research scholar at Princeton.
I told him to say that. But
She has a Ph.D. in human-centered computing from Georgia Tech. And before that has Masters and Bachelors degrees from University of Cape Town in South Africa. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. Thank you, Ben. So today I'm going to tell you about work I've been doing at my lab, the Princeton HCI lab. And I'm going to talk to you about 2 projects. But before I do, we're going to have a pop quiz. Don't look so worried, Claire. You don't have to have studied. It's very easy. Okay, so is this an ad?
Yes.
I told you it was easy, right? So this is an ad. This is an ad for Sprint. They're telling you how you'll save a lot of money if you go with them over Verizon or AT&T. And there's even a little small label at the top that says advertisement. Okay, so you did pretty well. Let's see how you do with this one. Is this an ad?
If you didn't know, having a husky means that you will have lots of hair everywhere, which also means that you have to vacuum a lot more than the regular household. So if this vacuum right here can clean up to the point where I don't have to use the other vacuum a lot, then that's going to be great. Then after.
So is it an ad? Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, arguably it is. It could be an ad. Could be a guy with just a dog hair problem who likes huskies. But yeah, it's an ad of some sort. Okay, it's not always totally easy or obvious to identify. This is actually a video that I pulled from YouTube. The content creator's name is Gohan the Husky. And he has a link here to the Eufy RoboVac that he mentioned in his video. What he doesn't tell you is that if you buy the Eufy RoboVac, or if you click on that link, he makes a little bit of money. So it is advertising, but it's not always as straightforward to identify ads. And the first project that I'm going to tell you about is how to identify trustworthy content, such as disguised ads on social media. Now, for the second project, okay, who's heard of Facebook Messenger? Everyone. Okay, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but yes, I've heard of Facebook Messenger. How many people have heard of Facebook Messenger for kids? Ah, okay, a couple of people. So for the rest of us, here's what it is. This is targeted at kids under the age of 13.
It allows kids to do what they like to do best, which is to be silly, to play, to see their grandparent laugh, to see their parent laugh.
Okay, sounds awesome. You can use filters just like us. You can send messages to other kids. You can send messages to your parents and their friends and so on. But actually, child health care advocates and mental health advocates have actually called for Mark Zuckerberg to shut this down because they're concerned about kids under the age of 13 being on social media from such a young age. Also, given the many privacy scandals that Facebook has had recently, it was also found that Facebook has been accused of exploiting kids. So it was found that they encouraged a lot of kids to play games online a few years ago. And in court documents, they even referred to some of the kids who were big spenders as whales, right? So the second project that I'm going to tell you about is how do we begin to think about protecting kids as young as 5 online? So what does it mean to think about keeping these kids safe online? Now, before I do that, I just wanted to summarize what do I do? So essentially, I provide people with information about how a system is working, what information it has about you, what it might be doing with that information, how it even got that information. So I try to make systems more intelligible and accountable for people. And specifically, I give them real-time information and control over internet performance, privacy, and security. And I call this internet transparency. And although today I'm only talking about 2 projects, I've actually worked in a number of different areas. So I've worked in the area to help people manage privacy and security online, to help manage internet costs and performance. And a lot of my work has also had a policy impact. So for example, when I lived in DC, I worked with a nonprofit there called the New America Foundation, and I helped them with their reports on data caps, or the limits of how much data you can use on your mobile phones and so on. And I'm now currently working with folks at the Federal Trade Commission to help them with their guidelines on online endorsements. So although today I'm only talking about these 2 projects, I don't have time to tell you about the other work that I have in usable privacy and security. For example, I've looked at user perceptions of privacy and security around drones. I'm currently working on tools to help people audit VPN connections. I've also worked on both understanding mental models of and helping people manage internet performance. And then similarly helped understand how people think about data costs online and how they manage these through various tools that I've created. So again, today I'm only talking about 2 projects, but before I get there, and I promise I will get there, I'm going to talk about how I do things, right? So I know folks like Ben and Sean and Leisha understand user-centered design, but just for those who are less familiar with it, I basically use this process in everything I do. In practice, it looks more like this. So there's a lot of movement between the stages. And I'm going to walk you through and tell you the kinds of methods that I use when I do my research. So first of all, if I'm trying to, for example, help people identify disguised ads, I tend to start off with, okay, what are the user needs? And I use qualitative techniques like interviews, surveys, focus groups, which are basically just group interviews. I sometimes conduct internet measurements or work with systems researchers and collaborate with others to conduct internet measurements. I often, if there's already a tool out there that helps people identify disguised ads, there isn't. I look at usage logs, and then I might also scrape online content to see, what do people actually need in this space. I'm usually not content to just stop there, so I always want to, once I've learned what user mental models are, to actually move to design, and actually design interventions. So here I use a lot of participatory design, which is basically involving end users in the design process. So in the second project I'm telling you about kids, I use a process called co-design. And that's basically where a child partner is like an equal design partner when you're designing a solution. And usually this ends up with low fidelity prototypes like paper prototypes or sometimes interactive PowerPoints and things like that. And then move on to full system implementation. So here I can spend up to a year creating a system. And sometimes I do this on my own. Sometimes I collaborate with others in systems and so on to create systems that people can actually use. This could be web tools or desktop or mobile apps. My goal here is twofold. One, I want to see what technologies are feasible to create a solution, and then also how do people react to it. And so I'm also more interested in, does this tell me more about the people that I was trying to learn about in the first place? So then I move on to evaluation. This is a key part of the process. It's not enough to just design a system and throw it out there, but you want to know, is this actually useful? And again, this uses, at this stage, I use things like qualitative techniques, interview surveys. I often do field deployments, which can be quite time-consuming. Again, conduct internet measurements, look at usage logs, and sometimes I do lab studies. So all of this depends on the problem that I'm trying to address. My work does not occur in a vacuum, so I often am informed by theories. So for example, in the Kids and Internet Safety project that I'm going to talk about, I've been using theories of privacy, like contextual integrity. I also have collaborators in learning sciences who have introduced me to other theories like Bronfenbrenner's theories of learning and how to effectively design solutions for learners, you have to look at the context that they exist in. So again, this is kind of what the process looks like in practice. So now let's get back to those 2 projects that I want to tell you about. And let's start off by talking about how do we help people identify disguised ads or misleading online content. And here we're going to start off with first answering the question, how often does this occur? So if we want to develop a solution to help people identify disguised ads, we first need to know, what are the user needs in the space? Who's putting up the disguised ads in the first place? So let's start off by looking at an influencer on YouTube. Now, for those of you who don't know, an influencer on social media is someone who has anywhere from tens to hundreds to thousands to millions of followers, right?
When I was a kid, all I ever wanted to be was a YouTuber. All I ever did was make videos.
Hey, who's this? Oh, it's me.
Funny enough, I was actually voted most likely to be a YouTuber in high school. And after I graduated, I made a promise to myself that I was going to do it.
Okay, so this is Elle of the Mills. She has 1.6 million subscribers. This video that I pulled has 1.9 million views. And in this video, Elle goes on to say how at the age of 19, she had a mental health breakdown. She explains how she used an app called betterhelp.com to help her overcome these mental health issues. And she urges viewers to use betterhelp.com to help them overcome their own mental health issues. She says that betterhelp.com links you with licensed counselors from all around the world, and that talking through your problems can really help you. In the video description here, Elle also includes a link to betterhelp.com. What she doesn't tell you is that every time you click that link, she earns about 10 cents a view. It's about $100 for 1,000 views. And this is essentially a form of what we call affiliate marketing. So an endorser like Al signs up with a company like betterhelp.com, and every time they direct traffic or refer sales, they earn some money from the company. And importantly here, Al in the video says she's working with betterhelp.com, but she doesn't disclose that it's a financial relationship. Now, as it turns out, it was not just Al who started having mental health issues. Many other influencers on YouTube started having mental health issues around the same time, and it was discovered that actually betterhelp.com was found to be somewhat of a scam. So people who signed up with the service were signing up with counselors who had no credentials, and they were often charged for things that they did not know that they would be charged for. Now, this shows that it's not enough to just identify disguised ads, but there can be real consequences if you do not understand that someone or something or some content you're looking at is a form of advertising. So the Federal Trade Commission actually has rules about this. They say that if there's a connection between an endorser like Al and a marketer like betterhelp.com, that you actually need to disclose that relationship. Now, interestingly, they don't have much legal power, so they can't sue someone like Al, but they can investigate complaints against someone like Al, because essentially what she's doing violates Section 5 of the FTC Act and is called deceptive advertising. Now, they can't sue her or fine her, but they can force her to give up any revenue that she's earned as a result of the relationship, and also force her to comply by disclosing this relationship in future. So let's see how we can actually identify and investigate disguised ads. So we started thinking about this problem, and we picked 2 social media platforms to do this on. And we built a Python-based web crawler and used prefix sampling to gather videos from YouTube and pins from Pinterest. So we got about 500K videos and 2.1 million pins. We then looked at all the URLs in those video descriptions and pin descriptions, and we took out all those URLs and resolved them. So we collected all the redirects, et cetera, to the final destinations, some of which timed out, but we ended up with a data set of URLs. So the reason that we wanted this data set is because we wanted to see what does an affiliate marketing URL look like. We wanted to be able to identify some sort of ground truth in these videos to know if something was actually advertising content. And so by doing a frequency analysis on the URLs we had gathered, we were able to see if there were any patterns in the URL. So we looked at the domain, subdomain, the URL path, and we also looked at the parameters in the URL. And we noticed that marketers need to identify the endorsers. So here's the link from Al, and it's pretty easy to see that they can easily identify that Al is the one who referred the traffic. Here's the example from Gohan the Husky, and here the tag parameter is referring to Gohan the Husky, right? So we did a lot of Google searching, and sometimes we signed up with affiliate marketing companies to make sure they were actually affiliate marketing companies. And we noticed that these affiliate marketing URLs follow this pattern to track the endorsers. And we found 57 URL patterns corresponding to 33 affiliate marketing companies. So this is the first data set of its kind. These kinds of URL patterns hadn't been sort of compiled into a data set, and we actually have this list available on GitHub. And most of these companies you may not recognize. The top one is Amazon.com, but you may not recognize AliExpress, Share a Sale, Reward Style, or Shop Style. eBay is probably familiar to you. Some companies like Apple and Booking.com actually have their own affiliate marketing programs. So once we had done that, we then took all our original videos and pins that we had scraped, and we pared it down to only those videos and pins that had affiliate marketing content. So content that we knew were advertising. And we took the description. So if you recall, the description is what's at the bottom of a video or pin. And then we turned this into a bag of words representation. We used hierarchical clustering and then manually extracted and analyzed the clusters. We used a process called qualitative data coding, which I'm going to explain later in the talk. And essentially, we tried to figure out, are people actually disclosing? If they're disclosing, how are they disclosing? So how common do you think it is that people like Al disclose that they have this affiliate marketing relationship? 1%. 12%. Okay, 12% is closer. 1% is, it's a little bit better than that, but not that much better. Okay, so only 10% of videos and only 7% of the pins with affiliate marketing content actually had any sort of disclosures. And then when we examine this, we noticed 3 different types of disclosures that people were making. So here are the examples of the disclosures. The first type of disclosure we called an affiliate link disclosure. So here, an example is affiliate links may be present, or on Pinterest, it was AF link. Now, the Federal Trade Commission explicitly discourages this type of disclosure because most people don't understand what an affiliate link is. The second type of disclosure that we found, we called an explanation disclosure. So here, the content creator is trying a little bit harder to explain that there's a financial relationship. So for example, someone might say, this is an affiliate link and I receive a commission for the sales. Right? So it's pretty straightforward and they're trying very hard to show that they're making money. And then the last type of disclosure that we noticed was what we called a channel support disclosure. So this one we only found on YouTube. And it said things like, Amazon link, bookmark this link to support the show, or support my channel by clicking on this link. So a little bit better than AF link, but not necessarily spelling out that there's a clear financial relationship. So we then went and we wanted to know, well, how common are the disclosures? And we saw that the type that the Federal Trade Commission explicitly discourages, that's actually the most common type that people use. So they're mostly saying things like AF link, affiliate link, and so on. The other types of disclosures like explanation and channel support are far less common. And in fact, channel support doesn't even happen on Pinterest.
Good question. Did you look at when they identified which links were affiliate links versus saying, the example you had, it said, some of these links may be affiliate links, but not which are which?
No, our analysis basically, we just went on, did they have at least one affiliate link and did they have at least one disclosure? But we didn't actually look at whether it was right next to the disclosure or if they were identifying every single affiliate link. So that's a good question.
I just wonder, I don't know if I heard this, but I almost heard the word resolved URL. Does that mean you're checking like short URLs like bit.ly
Yes.
and other things as well?
Yeah, because most of them are shortened URLs. Okay, so now that we know that people are putting up this kind of content on social media platforms, how do we actually go about designing a solution? And again, here, to inform the design, we had to actually think more about how do people actually understand disclosures. So to do so, we ran an experiment on Mechanical Turk where folks watched one of 5 randomly selected videos or pins. We had about 1,800 Mechanical Turk participants, and we varied the position that we showed them in disclosure, so either at the top or the bottom of a description. We had 2 sort of sub-experiments. In the YouTube experiments, we had 4 conditions. The first condition was we showed them no disclosure, and then the other 3 conditions were we showed them one of the 3 types we had noticed on YouTube. And in the Pinterest experiment, likewise, we had 3 conditions. Again, no disclosure was the control, and then the 2 types we showed were the 2 types we noticed on Pinterest. So do users understand this? What do we actually measure? So when people came in and watched the video or pin, we first asked them, what is their impression of this video? We often pulled a product like the Eufy RoboVac out to show them a product as well and ask them their impression of the product. We wanted to understand, do they notice the disclosure organically? Do they see a link between the endorser like L and the marketer like BetterHelp.com? And then finally, do they actually understand what the wording of the disclosure means? Now, in the interest of time, I don't have, I won't go through all the results, but I will focus on just 2 things. The first is, and before I get there, I'll just show you what it looks like. So when people came in to visualize what it looked like, they either came into the YouTube or Pinterest experiment, they watched a video or saw a pin. We would then ask them a series of questions and then show them the actual descriptions and sort of force them to read that. And this is an affiliate link condition in the top and an explanation condition at the top, just to give you an example. So let's look at the results. Did you have a question? Oh. No. Okay, just scratching your head. Okay. So let's look at the results. So when it came to noticing the experiment, I don't have this on the slide, but actually in all the conditions, people didn't really notice the disclosure if there was one, unless it was on Pinterest and unless it was an explanation condition, right? That was the only significant result we found. And then when it came to understanding the wording of the disclosure, so giving in mind that most people didn't notice a disclosure even if it was there, people most understood the explanation disclosure. So they did understand somewhat the other types, but explanation is the most straightforward, and people can understand that there's a financial link between the endorser and the marketer. So once we had this, we then moved on to implementation. So here, my students and I have built a working system called Ad Intuition. So it's a Chrome extension that works on YouTube. This is the same video I showed you before, and this is Ad Intuition working on that video. So here we have like a minimally intrusive banner, which we can vary the text of, and we're trying to use an explanation disclosure here to highlight that this has affiliate marketing content, and we can also highlight the affiliate links in the videos. And we're also extending this to include things like promotion codes. So someone like Elle might say, go to betterhelp.com and use my promo code Elle of the Mills, right? And we're trying to stick to that because at least, again, we have some sort of ground truth. Now we're doing this in a somewhat not the smartest way, I guess. So we're resolving URLs in the descriptions, and we're using regular expressions to pattern match with our data set. But we could obviously do a predictive model, and there are also privacy and other issues with that. So for example, we don't want to be like a click farm for Elle and be earning her credits, making it seem like all of these users are actually clicking these links. And then obviously we have to be careful about whether we resolve these links, on the client or on the server, and think about privacy for the person. Okay, so Ad Intuition is built. We are evaluating it right now, or at least in a few weeks. So what we're going to do is run an experiment on Amazon Mechanical Turk. We'll have a larger release to follow, and essentially what we're interested in measuring is how effective is this at helping users identify advertising content, and you know, how can we improve the user experience around the current design of Ad Intuition. So essentially, we'll have Turkers come in. They'll either have Ad Intuition, which doesn't really show anything, or they'll have Ad Intuition, which actually shows similar to what I showed you. And then we'll obviously have them watch a series of videos and ask questions similar to the experiment we did before. So the major takeaways of this project are 90% of affiliate marketing content on YouTube and Pinterest is undisclosed and also violates the Federal Trade Commission guidelines. Secondly, the most common disclosures, and I don't have it on here, but most disclosures are not even noticed. The most common disclosures, the affiliate link disclosures, are least understood and also are discouraged by the Federal Trade Commission. And then obviously, users need to identify ads more easily. Now, I've shown you one solution that we've created, Ad Intuition, but clearly the browsers have a part to play. So you could see how a browser might more easily help us identify this kind of content, and then certainly platforms have a part to play. So YouTube actually has a checkbox where you upload a video and you can check a box to say includes paid promotion, which usually plays at the beginning of a video, but it's unclear how many people use this. Right? And similarly, Instagram and some of the other social media platforms do have things like sponsored posts and so on. But again, it's not certain if people actually understand that, and they could certainly do more to help this. Okay, so the impact of this work?
So are you suggesting that for the platforms, there should be a reporting mechanism for the users?
There should be, you mean like reporting people who are doing it and not disclosing? No, what I'm suggesting is the platform should enable users to disclose more easily. So, for example, if you upload a video, it could maybe automatically detect that you have an affiliate link and maybe suggest, hey, maybe you should include this disclosure. Okay, so the impact of this work, as I mentioned, I'm working with the Federal Trade Commission to improve their guidelines and also help them identify why people may or may not be disclosing. And then I'm also working with the privacy-enhancing search engine, DuckDuckGo, to see if they'd like to include Ad Intuition into their suite of tools called Privacy Essentials, which include things like an ad blocker. Okay, so here's another side win. So according to Influencer Marketing Hub, the top influencer on YouTube is called PewDiePie. He has 83 million subscribers. This video I pulled had 4 million views. And thanks to media attention on this work, PewDiePie started using affiliate link disclosures, right? Okay, so that bit pretty much sums up the first project I wanted to tell you about, which was on misleading online content and helping people identify disguised ads. Now, the second project I want to tell you about is how to help young kids between the ages of 5 to 11 stay safe online. So again, here, this is a very broad question that I started off with, and I want to start off by telling you, how do we even start tackling this problem and understand how do young kids even perceive of or think about online privacy and security? And before that, I just want to give you a refresher. So remember Facebook Messenger for kids? How many people have Amazon Echo or Alexa? A few people. How many people have young kids? Dogs. Those are kids. How many people have both? Nobody? Sean? Uh-huh. Okay, so let's see what can go wrong in Sean's house.
Play ticker. Lata, play ticker.
Bobby, can you talk to play wheels?
You want to hear a station for porn detected. Porno ringtone, hot chick, amateur girl, quality sexy.
No! Alexa, stop!
Okay, so we hope that's not happening at Sean's house. But so young kids today are online at an earlier age, and they may be encountering inappropriate content. They may be subject to stranger danger, cyberbullying. Companies may be collecting a lot of data about them. So how do we start to think about how to improve privacy protections for young kids? So I started thinking about this project a few years ago, and it was because I noticed that most educational resources to teach kids about privacy and security online were directed at middle and high schoolers, but I didn't really see anything for elementary school age children. And I started to wonder, what kinds of resources would they need? And to answer this very broad question, I first wanted to step back and say, well, how do kids between the ages of 5 to 11 even think about online privacy and security? In particular, I was interested, given that these kids spend a lot of time in these two contexts, home and school, what kinds of activities do they do? Are they aware of online privacy and security? Is anyone actually teaching them about this? And do they have any sort of rules that regulate what they do online? And then obviously, as Sean and others can attest, kids of this age don't function on their own. They have parents. So, what are parents' roles in teaching kids about online privacy and security? Are they regulating online activities? Are they aware of online privacy and security issues? And are they explicitly teaching kids about these kinds of skills? And then finally, teachers. Again, young kids in elementary school spend a lot of time at school. So how are teachers approaching these issues, if at all? Are they actually using technology in the classroom? And are they aware of these issues? And then are they explicitly teaching these skills? So these are the questions that I went in with. And together with my collaborators, we conducted interviews with 18 families with kids in this age range, and also held focus groups with teachers. So teachers are very busy, and focus groups were much easier to organize than one-on-one interviews. And as I mentioned before, this was informed by theories of privacy like contextual integrity and learning sciences theories, which I'm sure Ben knows more about than I do, like Bronfenbrenner's theory of learning. So again, for those non-HCI folks in the room, and maybe the HCI folks, I wanted to take you through what do I mean when I say conduct an interview? What does that actually look like? What do you actually do? So like folks here, we always have to start off by getting our studies approved by the Institutional Review Board. And so when we conducted, for example, the family interviews, which I'm going to take you through here, we had to first get consent from our participants. And then we asked questions of the children about what online activities they did. If the topics of online privacy and security came about, then we would chat more with them about those topics. We also had the kids do an exercise where they had to tell a fictional friend what they would do if they encountered things like a mean message online or content that they did not understand. And then we then spoke to all the parents that had come to the interviews about the similar issues. All the interviews that we had were audio taped, and then obviously we compensated people because it takes time to participate in studies, and then we transcribed all of these interviews. We then performed qualitative data analysis. Now, if you recall, in the first project, we also used qualitative data analysis to help us identify the types of disclosures that people were making in our different clusters. So we started off by creating a code book. So for those of you who don't know about qualitative data analysis, have you ever tagged yourself on Facebook? Yes. Have you ever used a hashtag? Okay, well then you do know about qualitative data analysis, and actually you've been doing it in your everyday life, because all it is attaching a label, such as a hashtag or a tag, to a piece of data, like a photo or piece of text or whatever, right? So creating a code book is essentially like creating a list of tags that you're interested in. And what we did for our family interviews is we were interested in particular subjects. So our subjects of interest might have been, what are the activities children and parents are doing on devices? An example tag or code would be play games. What are the challenges that children and parents face? An example tag or code would be manage passwords. And then finally, what are the strategies that children and parents and teachers use to actually address these concerns? And an example tag here would be parental controls. So here is just an excerpt to show you what it looks like. This is a mom talking about how she doesn't want her young son getting on social media. And here are some example codes, or essentially labels and tags we would apply to this, like smartphone safety, password home, social media, screen time. These are all the things that she's talking about. And each of these tags would correspond to a piece of the text. Once we have all of these codes, some of which may have been in the initial code book or list of tags we had, some of which may have come through like many research meetings and seeing that other phenomena in the data were there and present and needed tags of their own. So I'm glossing over a lot of research meetings and pain here. We have like sometimes hundreds of codes. We then group them into categories, and these categories essentially become the final themes that will then make it into a research paper. So here are the final themes that came out of the family interviews. Here are the final themes that came out of the teacher interviews. Again, in the interest of time, I'm only going to tell you about 2 things. And I'm going to tell you about the things that I found most surprising when I was doing this research. The first is with respect to what kinds of privacy and security lessons children are receiving in school, as told to us by the children and their parents. So I found it really interesting that kids in elementary school mostly thought about online privacy and security in terms of passwords. And they told us how their teachers gave them cards like this with their username and password on them. They used things like their birthday, last name to create passwords that they could remember. And they often used Post-it notes. They also told us about lots of cases of hacking because, as you can imagine, the passwords were easily guessable. And if you ask any security expert, they'll tell you that this is, the #1 rule of something you should not do. You should not write your password down. You should not use information that someone else can easily guess. I found it really curious that this is what the kids mostly associated with online privacy and security, and yet they're learning these poor habits that we then are trying to beat out of them a few years later, right? They also told us they weren't learning much about privacy and security otherwise. The second thing that I found really interesting was with respect to the technology use in the classroom. So here, teachers told us about things like 2 systems in particular. They said they didn't have time to teach kids about privacy and security, but they were spying on the kids, right? So they told us about these 2 systems. This is called LAN School. Each of these little blocks up there is actually a real-time view of someone's laptop or machine. And then here, each of these is like someone's device in the class and like what are the different things that they're doing. So they told us that they use these systems and often they project them on the wall to keep children to task, right? So they really consider online privacy and security, but yet they're using these systems to make sure that if they're watching a YouTube video, that kids are staying to task. And I also found that curious. So I won't have time to tell you about all the other results, but I did want to explain how we then moved on to design. So we found that kids weren't really learning about these issues, and we wanted to see how do we actually create solutions to help kids learn about these issues. So we did 3 co-design sessions, and we did this in collaboration with 8 child design partners. And I want to explain what is a co-design session. So essentially, we start off with something called circle time. Everyone gathers around. We usually answer a question of the day. Here's an example question of the day from one of our actual sessions. It says, what is an example of something that is private to you? Some of the answers the kids have include toys I really like, where I keep my truffles, my private jet, and username and password. We then broke them up into groups. So depending on the goal of the session, we break them up into groups and have them participate in activities. In this case, we had 3 activities or 3 different sessions. The first, we showed them existing resources targeted towards kids in this age range. So Google has, for example, a suite of games called Interland that teach kids about online privacy and security. We co-designed a mobile game with them, which I'll tell you about in a bit. And then we wanted to see, given that privacy and security are very nuanced concepts, how well does Choose Your Own Adventure stories lend itself to teaching kids about these concepts? So if you don't know Choose Your Own Adventure stories, these are books that I used to read a while ago where it might be like a spaceship story or a story about aliens, and a spaceship might land in part of the story, and if you want to get on the spaceship, you go to page 11, and if you don't, you go to page 74, and that changes the trajectory of the story. So once kids are finished doing the activities that give us feedback or help us with design in various ways, we do wrap-up discussions, we take field notes and pictures, and then once the kids leave, we do a team debrief. And then we qualitatively analyze all of that data using the process that I mentioned. So together with my student, I'm just going to tell you about one game that we designed, or one session. Here, we tried to design a game to investigate what kinds of scenarios kids might learn from in terms of privacy and security. Does anyone know Doodle Jump? Okay, so Doodle Jump is a mobile game on your phone. You tilt the phone to move this character up an endless series of platforms, and if you fall, you basically die. If you get like a power-up like that beanie, you'll be boosted up multiple platforms. So we said, what if there was like a privacy Doodle Jump, and you had like a scenario that was very relatable to the kids? For example, in this one, it's saying Arthur's on his Xbox, and it's asking for his mom's credit card in this advertisement. What should Arthur do? If a kid answers correctly, we thought we'd give them an encouraging message, or if not, we'd sort of nudge them in the right direction by saying, okay, maybe you shouldn't be doing that, maybe you should be doing this instead. And we found 2 things when working with the kids in the co-design session. The first was this kind of scenario was much easier for them to relate to their everyday lives and the concepts of online privacy and security than some of the engaging games that Google has, because they could understand how they could apply it in their own lives. And then the second was they didn't want something that was just privacy and security thrown in another game, right? They wanted something privacy and security themed. In the words of our child design partner, I hate it when they take a perfectly good game and they try to make it educational, right? So it's a fine line between making something engaging and actually helping kids learn about online privacy and security. So then we moved on to actually implementing a system. We implemented more than one, but I'm only going to talk about one today. So here, this is a mobile game, and this is an early prototype that we had of a game called Cybernaut. We styled it to look like an astronaut going through a motherboard of a computer, escaping a wall of fire to keep the privacy and security theme. We had question zones, and this is all based on feedback from the design sessions where kids could get like basic conceptual questions about different privacy and security concepts like hacking or digital footprints. And then we restyled the scenario-based question. So when a character sort of falls off, or the astronaut falls off a platform, they get a second chance and have to answer a scenario question. And we evaluated this with 14 kids and their parents. This was really targeted at kids aged 7 to 11. But parents are busy, and they brought siblings with, so we actually had a wider age range doing the evaluation, right? So I won't go through this again, but I just wanted to show you, similar to the interviews, we had a session where we did qualitative evaluation, and we asked a bunch of questions, and the folks played Cybernaut, and we asked specifically about that. Here are the themes that came out of this sort of evaluation of this game and another game we made. But I'm only going to tell you about one thing in the interest of time. So I think the main thing that came out of the evaluation was that kids are really different. We had one 8-year-old girl who could read the questions that we had very easily, another 8-year-old who was still struggling and learning how to read. Also, kids differed a lot in their motor abilities and their reading abilities, and also their cognitive development. So that made it really difficult for them to understand concepts like hacking and so on. And especially, kids have different experiences online. So kids aged 5 to 8 were not really on social media and so on, but kids aged 9 to 11 were on things like Musical.ly, which is now called TikTok, where you upload videos with your friends and so on. And that made it easier for us to get those kids to learn the privacy and security concepts we were trying to help them learn about. So you have this weird issue where you're trying to teach kids that are younger, between the ages of 5 to 8, about privacy and security online, but they haven't really had much experience with that. And the current situation at schools is that most of the resources are focused on middle and high school. Now, the analogy that I'd like to use here is that essentially with privacy and security education right now, we're trying to teach kids to swim when they're already in shark-infested waters. Right? So when they're already at risk for cyberbullying and stranger danger, et cetera, that's when we're giving them lessons. But I am sort of suggesting that they kind of need more foundational lessons and sort of lessons that are geared more at getting them comfortable in the pool and learning the strokes before they get to the shark-infested waters. And I think here we can teach kids about things like, what does privacy mean? And this can vary depending on culture, but it might mean something like going to the bathroom with the door closed, or knocking on the door before you enter. And I think that building up those skills will still help kids before you get to the stage where you're teaching them more directly about things that happen online. So the major takeaways from this study are it's much easier to teach kids about privacy and security if you use scenarios they can relate to. And then really we want to help teach kids in this age range about privacy and security earlier. So we want to teach them to float before they can swim and swim before they're in shark-infested waters when they're still at a stage where they're receptive to things that adults and parents and so on say. So the impact of this work, I am actually working with the Google's team that has designed that game. So they have a program called Be Internet Awesome. So they funded this work, and we work directly with them to influence the games and curricula that they have. And then also, I don't believe in just publishing papers. To have broader impact, I've also co-organized symposia at Princeton with Cornell Tech to teach others about the theory of contextual integrity. That's the theory of privacy I mentioned. And then also to teach others how to work with and design with young kids. So I held a workshop with my collaborators at the Usenix Usable Security Workshop to teach others about how to design with young kids. So that sums up the second project that I wanted to tell you about how to start thinking about helping young kids to learn about how to stay safe online. And to remind you, we also spoke about how to help users identify misleading online content, such as disguised ads online. I wanted to tell you about a few other projects that I have going on. So in the misleading online content space, I'm also looking at e-commerce and how they're misleading things on e-commerce. So for example, if you're trying to book a flight and they say, there's only one left at that price, is that real? Is there really only one left at the price? Are 18 people really looking at the same backpack that I'm looking at? And as preliminary results suggest that sometimes it's just randomly generated. And then we also want to look at that in political campaigns. I have some projects in South Africa looking at how people manage privacy settings. And then I'm also looking at how to help children identify online ads. Future research agenda, I just mentioned 2 examples of internet transparency, but really this could be extended. I've spoken a lot about young kids, but this could be extended to other marginalized populations and also to older adults as well, who might face a lot of similar issues in terms of understanding privacy and security. And then I've done a lot of work that I'm not mentioning in this talk in sustainability, and I feel that a lot of the lessons that I've learned from helping people manage internet infrastructure can also apply to resource infrastructure. So I'm interested in helping people understand their environmental impact. I think we can do a lot more in terms of improving interface metaphors beyond speedometers and locks in this space. And then finally, I think it's really valuable to have reusable data sets and infrastructure sort of like the data set of URL patterns that I mentioned in the beginning project. And I think that we can do more to enable other tool builders and other research to happen in this kind of space. So I'd like to thank the collaborators and the students who worked on the 2 projects that I mentioned today. That was funded by NSF and Google. And thank you. This is what I do. Questions? Okay, at the back.
When working with young children, do you ever find that you need to motivate the very concept of privacy or the desire for privacy? Like, I wonder if for young children, maybe they're like, oh, like I have nothing to hide, and I think that's something that's a sentiment that people continue to express.
Even as adults.
As adults, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess to be clear, it's not that we're trying to suddenly get kids as young as 5 saying, I need to worry about what I'm posting online, because number one, they're probably not posting online, and they're probably not cognitively at that stage where they could understand about, you know, having an audience and so on, right? But I think what we are trying to do is to try and figure out what are the foundational skills they need to learn about just basic privacy and security that they then need to build on as they move through elementary school and start learning more about what they need to do online. And yes, it is very challenging. So even the teachers we spoke to said, you know, kids have a hard time understanding online reputation and how, you know, their digital footprint is following them through the life, and how what they post in like 5th grade might actually affect them when they're applying for a job, or even in high school or middle school, right? So I think that that's challenging, not just for working with young kids, but it's certainly something that we're still sort of trying to figure out, like, what is the ideal way to do it. Martha?
So right at the end you said something about connection between internet transparency and environmental.
Yes.
Could you say more about that?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I think like for that specifically, when I thought about it here, it could mean 2 things. Like one, it could literally mean what is your environmental impact of using certain things. So for example, you know, how much energy does it take to do a Google search, for example, which I don't think we have a lot of insight into. But I also was trying to draw a parallel between the internet infrastructure and resource transparency, which is how much, you know, because there are a lot of similar things like real-time information about usage of data and things like that also apply to like how much water am I using, how much energy am I using, and so on. So it could be 2 things. One, what is your impact on the internet, but also in a totally different domain, what is your impact on like actual renewable resources? Or non-renewable resources. Wait, I don't know. Yeah, both, yes.
In your ad intuition work, obviously the current state of affairs is not great for consumers. And I'm just curious, though, how you feel the platforms feel the current state is. If this is,
right.
If they're happy to still have millions of views and subscribers and all this, and it doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, I think the incentives are not really there for the platforms, because remember, if the Federal Trade Commission is going to come after someone, they're going to go someone like after PewDiePie, not YouTube, right? So currently, it's not like the platforms are incentivized to change anything, right? It's arguable. I mean, obviously, there have been many discussions about whether they should be responsible for the content that they're hosting, whether it's disguised ads or, you know, other bad content. But I don't think that the incentives are there for them to actually regulate it, right? And I think that's why we haven't seen much like innovation in that space. But they could do some of this stuff arguably on their side too. And like I said, say, hey, you have this kind of affiliate link, maybe you should include this disclosure. But again, I don't think they have a strong incentive to do that, because you know, they want things to go viral. They want users to be watching these videos. I didn't mention in here, but actually another thing we noticed is that affiliate marketing content tends to be on social media content that has higher engagement. So the more popular videos, the ones with the more views and so on, tend to have affiliate marketing content, right? So I just don't think the platforms have great incentives to do so. Deja?
So an observation, that maybe you could react to it. So I'm not sure about the question quite yet. But it seems, so when I see words privacy and security in young children, I think, okay, wow, so hard to explain that.
Yeah.
Even adults, we have to like
yeah.
make distinctions between what does it mean to be surveilled versus privacy versus security versus safety. These all have kind of different consequences
right.
in our lives in lots
yes.
of ways, including online. With children, very young children in the age group you're talking about, they're often taught that secrets are a bad thing.
Right.
Because it's a basic fundamental construct that if you have to keep a secret, there's something wrong about that.
Right.
And that's different than a surprise, like a surprise for dad at a
right.
birthday party versus a secret that somebody's keeping a gun in their house at your
oh, right,
like,
right.
So that's why they make the distinction often. So like these would be really difficult things to, okay. Then I think about that work, and I think about is it Ellie Mills, the video?
Oh yeah, Elle of the Mills,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, and that's who a lot of these
yeah.
kids see. And so I've often thought about instead, rather than framing this as an online privacy issue,
Right.
in framing this as an online publicity issue. So how do you manage your online publicity and how much you're seen versus how much you keep? Because young children don't know to keep things.
You mean like your audience kind of thing?
Well, yes, and like, I mean, we're as public as often as we are private, and my kids are now being exposed to ideas that being public all the time is really great. You can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You can have 1.9 million views.
Yeah.
With whatever they're doing. Okay,
Right.
So I'm just wondering if I'm wondering if it's easier to get to management of self and information about self if we frame it as a managing publicity issue versus a privacy issue.
Right. Well, I think one, and someone asked me this earlier, and I don't actually have the full answer to this, is online privacy and security is huge. It could be about digital reputation and managing perception of self and public and private personas and so on. But it could also be teaching someone how to manage cyberbullying, right? Or it could be managing a password. So right now, there are a whole host of different topics. Like the other game that we had was actually about cyberbullying and like how to help kids learn about how to deal with those kinds of situations. So I think it's huge. There's like a lot of potential for things that are more directly like privacy and security. But then I do think that digital reputation lends itself a lot to what you're saying. And that could be something that's better for like maybe fourth and fifth grade. But I think beyond like the lower grades, they may not, kind of like the earlier question, they just may not grasp that so much. So I think it depends a lot on age. And then what I was saying is that there's so much variation even within age that it's almost like some of these resources need to be very personalized and tailored depending on the experience of the child online and also like where they are milestone-wise.
I actually have two questions. The first is the disclaimer. I'm wondering what you think if the disclaimer was given in a video format at the beginning of the video.
Right. I think that would be really good. So we actually looked and examined a subset of the videos. We actually watched them and looked at all the pins to see if people were disclosing in the videos. And we did not see much of that. And we also looked at the transcripts of the videos and the description of the pins. And we didn't find much there. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But I do think that including a disclosure in the video would be good. The includes paid promotion is actually, it's text that looks similar to that advertisement label that plays at the beginning of a video. But it's very, it's low contrast, it's easy to miss, and people may still not know what that means. Sometimes people may say this has been sponsored by, but again, it's not necessarily clear, right? But I do think that watching it and also seeing it in the description, like seeing it as many times as possible, is helping people be more informed.
So just for the second question here, do you think that this might be an ethical use of deepfakes to put somebody, because there have a huge body of work from almost all of these YouTubers, and you basically be able to recover in a similar manner that we have, fake speeches from our president. You could actually put your transcripts or your affiliate links and say, I am sponsored by this person, you could synthesize this. And I'm wondering, I've been trying to figure out ethical uses of this technology, and this sounds like it might be one.
Right, I don't know as much about deepfakes.
Okay.
Right, so I'm
fake Obama speech that you
gave. Right. So I guess I'm less qualified to answer like how it would be applied because I'm not sure of the exact, like I don't know, how are you envisioning that it would be, like, I don't even know how.
Basically, you can capture somebody in a similar context that they've been before and put words in their mouth.
Oh, right. I don't know that you would want to be putting words in people's mouth, but I think you would want to have them be disclosing of their own accord, right?
But if they chose not to,
but if they chose not to, I still feel like that's a tricky situation. Like even with ad intuition, we don't want to have false positives, right? That's why we're sticking to things where we have a ground truth. There are plenty of other things that we could look for. In fact, we thought about looking for sponsored posts because often, the descriptions might say sponsored post, or even just like looking for promo code in a naive way would just, turn up videos that have code in them, for example, about CS programming, right? So I think we also have to be careful about, just not misleading people by trying to be transparent, but not misleading people in another way.
So I guess I have a question that's in the same neighborhood as Laisha's question, but from a different perspective. So we have this really brilliant colleague named Jed who's been studying what happens to people's social media when they die and
Oh, right, yeah.
Agency to sort of, they've curated this image of themselves and saying,
Right.
but there's a mirror image problem, which is, I don't have children, I don't want children, but I unfortunately like have a lot of things in social media about my friends' children.
Right.
And often they post very personal things about their children. that
Right.
I can imagine when they're older, they are not going to be happy
Right.
to have on the internet about that. And I'm curious if you have ideas about how theories of
Sanitize.
privacy and sovereignty could lead to the design of tools that then let youth maybe take these things down or
Like
regulate them.
sanitize the internet.
Yeah.
Like the Google's right to be forgotten except for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, but I think a lot of it, that's a very personal thing. Different parents share different, it's...
That's where they choose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, the argument is that the kids don't have a choice, but again, that varies from parent to parent. Some parents, like myself, I don't post anything online about my kids, but some parents want to share a lot. So, and I don't judge either way. And I think that that's tough to reconcile that with what the choice of the child is, because at some level, the parent is still the steward of the child until they turn 18. So it's kind of tricky territory. I do think that there's a place for tools like that to like help a kid sanitize what's out there. But I feel like, again, that has to be up to the kid when they're of age.
I have a question about, more generally about approaching privacy and security from an HCI/usability
Right.
perspective. Do you have any thoughts about sort of more traditional security and privacy constructs from a usability perspective? And I guess not to be too cynical, but do things like public key infrastructure have any hope?
I think yes, but it has to be usable, right? So it's kind of like, how many people here use Signal? It's supposed to be really like strong. Okay, so some people use Signal, and some people use like WhatsApp, for example, right? Now, even if you really wanted strong encryption and you might use Signal, maybe the rest of your friends aren't on Signal. So you're still going to use something where your friends are on there. So the problem is not that the encryption isn't strong or that it's a good solution, like from a security perspective, it's really the human. Like you want to be where your friends are. It doesn't matter that this is more secure, right? So I think at the end of the day, in like usable privacy and security, we always say it comes down to the human, right? So if it's not usable, people are not going to use it. So yes, public key infrastructure is good, but if it's not usable, people are probably not going to use it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
We talked about how teenagers are already swimming in shark-infested waters,
Yeah.
and you want to teach them how to float before you swim. But if they're already in those waters, what suggestions would you give for education around privacy and security? Would you give the same suggestions, more relatable scenarios?
Right. I mean, like, I think that would help. Again, I don't want to say anything because I'm not as familiar with like tweens and teens. So I don't know how you help them when they're already in that space. But I would say that probably a lot of the similar things apply. Because again, if you can't relate some of these, like I guess what I'm advocating for is not like a do this, don't do this. Like make a strong password, use this and not that, right? But like maybe using scenarios or showing people potential consequences of what they're doing, I think that's more effective because then they can understand why they need to or not need to do those things, right? I think it's very difficult. I mean, even adults have the same problem. Like some of the stuff we're doing, another project I have is on online tracking and helping kids understand online tracking. But actually the stuff we're building could even help adults understand online tracking. I mean, I think it's just like a lot of people don't understand what privacy and security online is. So, it might be directed towards kids, but it could be for anyone. And yeah, I guess I don't know enough about that population to say definitively what we should do.
That's all the time we have for now. Thank you, Marshini. For the students who are